I'm so sorry I can't be with all of you at the conference, but thank you for inviting me in this way. You know, when I look back at my long professional life, the most wonderful years were the years of 89 to 91, when everything started to happen. The wall came down, the Berlin Wall, the Iron Curtain broke down. Suddenly, borders disappeared so you could get into countries and get out of countries, which was not least the most important thing. So it was a wonderful period. Of course, when Poland, Czechoslovakia, and all the others started to break out of the Eastern Bloc, we had three small problems in our neighborhood. The three Baltic countries, who had been forced into the Soviet Union back in the early years of World War II and had been occupied ever since. But there was, in Denmark at that time, a growing interest in the Baltic countries. I think it dawned upon a lot of people that their fate might have been our fate. Just imagine if the Soviet Marshal Rokossovsky and his army had succeeded in getting north of Berlin in the final days and hours of World War II, taking Lübeck, taking Kiel, getting up in Jutland, taking Denmark, the Straits. Well, it was a matter of hours before that would happen. And then who knows, our fate might have been the same as that of the Baltic states. There was one manifestation there, and that took place in August of 1989, the human chain. 2 million people in a silent, dignified demonstration grabbed hands and formed the human chain from Tallinn in Estonia and down to Vilnius in Lithuania, in a protest, a silent protest against the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact that had forced these countries to be part of the Soviet Union, with all that this implied. People started to getting out. It became easier under Gorbachev. They also came to Denmark. And I remember one visit in particular. That was the Prime Minister of Lithuania, Kazimiera Prunskiene. She came here, and we picked her up in the finest limo we could find in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, put the Lithuanian flag on the car and the Danish flag when we drove in from Kastrup Airport. And she and I held a press conference together where you had the Lithuanian and the Danish flag in front of us. Oh, the Soviet ambassador, he immediately went up to the ministry protesting and was told, of course, that, we recognized Lithuania as an independent state back in 1921. We have never recognized it as a part of the Soviet Union. So that's a fact. And you know, this was an important point in all that happened in these years. Denmark had never recognized the forced inclusion of these countries in the Soviet Union. And we used that as an argument to try to treat these countries as what they wanted to be, free countries who were temporarily occupied. It gave us some problems. In January 91, the Baltic countries were attacked by Soviet Oman troops. That was special troops from the Ministry of the Interior. There was an attack on the TV tower in Vilnius. There was an attack on the Saima, the parliament in Riga, and the people were killed. And the world protested. And suddenly it became much easier to talk about the Baltic countries and their cause in places like the EU and NATO and elsewhere, where some of the bigger countries until then had said, when Denmark, first of all, of course, and some others as well, started to talk about the Baltic countries, the reaction from the big guys was, don't rock the boat. We have Gorbachev. We don't want to make too many problems for Gorbachev, so don't rock the boat. Well, that certainly changed after the attacks and the bloodshed in January of 91. In Denmark, we invited the three countries to sign joint protocols on cooperation. I have a copy here from March 1991. And in this cooperation protocol, this was the one with Estonia, signed by Lennart Meri, who later became president of Estonia, and myself. And I would just like to quote two important points from this protocol. Well, we recall that before the Second World War, Denmark and Estonia, which were both members of the League of Nations, had good and friendly relations, but that these were interrupted for 50 years by the forcible incorporation of the Republic of Estonia into the Soviet Union in 1940. Denmark, which recognized Estonia in 1991, never recognized the legality of that incorporation. This was a key element. Then we list a lot of areas in which we would try to cooperate, support Estonia, etc. And then the end says, when the situation makes it possible, Denmark and Estonia will seek to re-establish diplomatic relations. Well, at that time, I certainly did not have the fantasy to see when and how that would happen. I also have some telegrams here from our embassy in Moscow. They were called up to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Moscow, and they were told that this was an unfriendly action by Denmark, and they wanted to punish us in some ways. They even threatened, at that time to make problems for the project of building a Great Belt Bridge, where we had been through difficult negotiations on how tall should such a bridge be, etc. So they threatened to block the whole project. And, well, they were angry. We had to let them be angry. Things became very tense during the summer of 91. That was when there was an attack by probably Oman forces on a small border post in Lithuania, in the town of Medininkai, and everybody there was killed except one. There were 9 border guards, young, unarmed customs officers. Only one survived. I visited him some years later. He was in a wheelchair, had become a priest, and told me about that horrible night. So things were tense. Then came August 1991, the putsch. The older ones among you might remember the early Monday morning when we were told that there were military music in Radio Moscow, and they had declared that Gorbachev, who was on Crimea, would be put in house arrest, and a small committee of hardliners had taken over. It was a couple of very tense days. I remember on Wednesday in that week, we had a NATO foreign ministers meeting in Brussels. And during that meeting, the then Secretary General, he said that, well, I'm told that there is a telephone call to me from Yeltsin in Moscow. Wait a minute, guys. And out he went, came back a little later, said, greetings to you from Boris Yeltsin. He says that, don't worry, I've got everything under control. And when you write your communique from your meeting, I have a point I would like you to add. I sat there doing like that. Am I awake? Am I dreaming? Yeltsin, who at that time was a leader of the Russian Republic within the Soviet Union, he told NATO foreign ministers, please guys, put something in. And I really felt that new day had dawned. When I came home, Jānis Jurkants from Latvia, who was foreign minister at that time, he sat in my home. He had slipped out of Latvia with a mandate to make a government in exile in Copenhagen should everything continue the wrong way. But now instead we could open a bottle of champagne before he went home. The next couple of days, we stayed in touch with, in particular, Estonia, where the most direct border to the Soviet Union was. And on Saturday, they told us on a special telephone line we had to the foreign minister, an old Dan-call telephone from northern Jutland that he could use on the Nordic mobile net getting around Moscow. And they told us that the so-called Estonian Defense League, that was all the paramilitary forces in Estonia, they had control over the border. Well, in order to re-establish diplomatic relations, it is important to know that they have control over their border. So we debated it, and I called some central persons at home, prime minister, leading parliamentarians, etc. They agreed. So in the evening of that Saturday, we made public that Denmark would re-establish diplomatic relations with the three Baltic countries, and that an ambassador would be on his way. The next morning, I was sitting at the breakfast table in my home. It was Sunday morning, and then the phone called. That was my good friend and colleague, Hans-Dietrich Genscher from Germany. And he said, Uffe, my people are telling me that Denmark has re-established diplomatic relations with the three Baltic countries. Is that true? Yes, I said. But Uffe, didn't we agree that we should communicate with each other before taking that kind of steps? Yes, but you didn't call me. No, because you would have asked me to wait, and I would not wait. And I would not tell my good friend that I didn't want to follow his advice. Silence for a moment. Then he said, du bist frisch, but I will support you if you get into problems. And don't worry, I will do everything I can to follow up. And he did. And you know, that was the wonderful things, that this was a window of opportunity. We had an opportunity in Denmark to open that window. And suddenly a lot of things happened after that. And it all culminated, of course, with the EU membership and the NATO membership. It took a long and difficult time to get there. Well, I was no longer in government, but the government that took over after us certainly did not miss any possibility to support that process. And my old political enemy, Nyrup Rasmussen, who was prime minister, he did a wonderful job in supporting NATO membership for the three Baltic countries when it was difficult to get through. I was in Vilnius the morning when we had celebrated the enlargement of NATO in Prague the day before. And the American president, George W. Bush, he was in Vilnius, and he would give a speech. It was the morning of November the 23rd. It was damned cold, I tell you. People who had been standing there on the town hall square in Vilnius, they had been freezing for hours. But then came Bush, and Bush gave a speech, and he said in that speech, and I quote, "Anyone who would choose Lithuania as an enemy has also made an enemy of the United States. And people started to yell, achoo, 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 like they were sneezing, which one might understand, I suppose, as it was. And I heard Bush asking the president of Lithuania, who was there, Adamkus, what are they saying? What are they saying? And Adamkus said, achoo in Lithuanian means thank you. Bush said, you're welcome. And this day, if any of you should go to Vilnius, I can recommend that, also a beautiful city, you will see on the town hall, there's a plate with this quote from George W. Bush that gives the whole essence of NATO membership, the musketeer oath, so to say. Well, I think I stop here because you now have the 3 Baltic countries as EU members without reservations like some other EU members I could mention, members of the Euro, of course. They are highly respected members of NATO, all 3 of them above the 2% promise about how to pay to NATO. So one might feel tempted to say, mission accomplished, but, and I'm sure that would be a topic of your further discussions at this conference. The mission is not accomplished, it is not ended. It is still necessary for small countries in our region to stick together in order to defend our freedom. Thank you. Have a good conference.